Well, hello and welcome to week 5 of Liturgies and Pentecostal Ministries. Here we are in a whole new chapter, and just let me remind you that in Cumberland we are on chapter 5 of the second edition, which is on baptism. This is the chapter that we're looking at this week on baptism, and so those of you who read chapter 5 last week, you're ahead of the game. But even though you might have posted on baptism last week, you need to post, even if it's just copy and paste what you did last week, on this week's discussion page to get credit. And so I'm looking for posts on baptism. I'm just going to say, if you post on anything else this week, I may have to take some grades off, because I've tried to adjust that, and we really need to stay on task with the book that we're using for this class. And so just go to that chapter on baptism, post on the discussion page, and we will go from there. Tomlinson does a good job with this and the importance of water baptism. There's also a link to a teaching that he offers on YouTube that you might be interested in, just for your own edification, and look at that for your own learning purposes. But this week I really want to emphasize what James Smith is offering us with this idea of these familial liturgies. He's already talked about cultural liturgies and the way that we need to push back on that. This week he's really looking at what's going on in the home and how we are shaped by these habits, by these liturgies that we need to recognize. And he talks a lot about technology in here. And here's the deal. I never want to get anti-technology, right? I'm not against technology. I mean, think about it. I'm using a camera here that's going into my computer that later I will put on the internet so we can teach online, right? And so we don't want to be anti-technology. We just want to be a people who recognize how we are being shaped. And as ministers of the gospel, we have a responsibility to bring other people along, to help them to see these liturgies. And I'm really looking forward to just what takes place after these classes, and how you all will engage ministry with these ideas and help people to recognize that there are things that shape us. And while we don't want to demonize technology, we don't want to demonize necessary cultural liturgies. They're a part of our lives. We like to go to parades, and we like to go to the mall, and we like to go to places that, shape us culturally. But we need to be aware of how they pull on our heartstrings, and the necessity to have counter liturgies, worship. And so James Smith does a good job with that in this book, talking about what's going on in the family. There's been a lot of research on child development. And I want to talk about two aspects of that associated with what James Smith has to say in chapter 5, this idea of child development. First of all, children, if you notice, I'm talking about small children, but even, as they grow, we're all a little bit, narcissistic, right? We all like to have a little bit of attention to us, unless you're a total introvert and you don't. But think about little children, and how, I'm talking about toddlers and below. I'm talking about even babies, where if you don't give them your attention, eye contact, they begin to act out. And it's just something about children, and their idea of the whole universe kind of revolves around them. And so what do? They'll do a little dance for us, and they'll look at us. Are you looking at me? They'll sing a little song, or they'll say something funny, and you laugh. And so they'll say it over and over again. So you give them their attention. I think Smith does a good idea, and he doesn't have to. We see it all the time. But so many of us parents, so many of us adults, we have our face in this screen so much of the time, and our children are acting out. And we really need to think about how our children are developing, and somehow be able to say, no, I need to be with this child at this time. I need to be with this relationship at this time. Let's put the technology down and really be intentional. Again, we don't want to throw our phones away. We don't want to become anti-phone or think that this is some type of, demonic ploy or anything like that. But what we want to do, I'm trying to turn this thing off, what we want to do is we want to let people be aware of what's going on. And so think about how parents today perhaps are distracted by social media or other conversations on the phone. And when they're with their children, they need to give their attention to their children. Do some research on that. See about how child development. Another aspect of that is the way that children mimic their parents. There's been a lot of research about that we learn not necessarily by words and cognitive ways of learning, but we learn by mimicking others. We see our parents, working on the car. And what does the little child do? He goes out there and gets his plastic tools and he begins to work just like his dad. Or maybe he sees his mom cooking in the kitchen and he wants to get the bowl out and start stirring an empty pot. Why? He's mimicking. We mimic. And here's the deal. If we're constantly, holding this thing in our hand and constantly distracted by this, how are our children going to mimic that? And I don't need to tell you that. You've seen it. You've seen it in the mall. You've seen it perhaps in your own house. And maybe you've had to make rules, like at the dinner table. No phones at the dinner table. By the way, that's a good rule. And just be with the people that you are with. Don't be with people out in cyberspace. And so I don't want to preach to you about that. I think he does a good job with that and allows us to at least recognize that. And as ministers of the gospel, this is our task, to help people recognize these liturgies, not to demonize them, not to, throw out all the technology, but let's recognize how we're being shaped and how we can push back on that. Well, I have a resource on the Lesson 5 page on James Smith's Desiring the Kingdom. It's one of 3 in his cultural liturgies. Just let me tell you a quick story about that. We've got time this week. Let's see. Yeah, it's only about 6 minutes in. Let me just say this. James Smith was working on his first book of 3 in these cultural liturgies. And he wrote Desiring the Kingdom. And I have that on there. And he really goes into more detail and kind of more technical work. In other words, this is a real scholarly work. This is for people in seminary and pastors who really want to dig deeper into these ideas that he gives. And he wrote this book, and he was on his way to write the 3, and he stops. He realizes that he's on to something, that what he is offering has got to be more than just academic. It's got to be more than just for those in seminary. And so he stopped writing his trilogy, and he wrote this book. This is where this book comes from. And this is obviously, it seems like most of you, all of you are enjoying this book. You're learning a lot. And this was important. We thank God that he gave this to us. But if you really want to go deep into these, and he offers some amazing antidotes and lessons, I would recommend getting all 3. But Desiring the Kingdom, the first of the 3, is really good and puts you deeper into these things. And so if you're interested in that, go to that. My children bought me the whole set for Christmas. I haven't even opened it yet because I actually have all 3 books already. I've read them, and so I just kind of keep this as a keepsake from my children. Needless to say, I really like what James Smith has to offer us in these liturgies, and I think you see the point by reading through You Are What You Loved. Well, I really don't have a whole lot more to share with you this week. I want to get this video on the website. I will say that our discussions, you are getting those in, but let me just encourage you. Do more than just respond to a couple of the students and just kind of putting some comments in there. I'd really like to see some discussions, right? I'd really like to see how we could engage in discussion. I know that time is limited, but perhaps after you put your first post there on Wednesday, that you come back and comment on other posts, and then come back again. I'm not saying be on there all day long. Maybe on Thursday night, or maybe Wednesday night after everybody posts, make your initial comments a response to your fellow students, and then come back Friday and see how they responded to you, and then you respond back. I'm just offering a suggestion here. There is a minimum that you can get, and if that's what you want, that's fine. But I'd really like to see some discussions because, first of all, I learned so much from you. And we learn so much from each other as we discuss these things. And so just let me encourage you with that. Hey, I got to get this video on before it gets too late. But anyways, keep up the good work. Don't forget there is a paper coming up due on James Smith. I believe it's chapter 3. You have to look at that. I think I said that right, chapter 3. a reflection paper on that. There's also another extra credit coming up. Some of you didn't get the extra credit on ATLA. It's too late to get that now, but there is another extra credit assignment coming up. Go to a church service. I know for you pastors, you're going to have to go at a different day, but there's Eastern Orthodox, Catholic, Lutheran, Methodist services, perhaps on the weekends that you can go to, Saturday or Friday. It's an easy 5 points, just a short reflection paper on that. And so I would encourage you to get the extra credit because, again, you're going to want that because when you turn in your final papers, they're going to be graded heavily. I rarely give anybody an A on a paper. Not that I'm mean or nasty, it's just, you know, an A is an A. And we, at this level, just don't have those writing skills that perhaps somebody who has a master's or a doctoral degree would have. And so I grade in a way that challenges you to always do better. I don't need to say any more about that. If you have any questions on any of the lessons or where we are, shoot me an email. If you have any questions on the assignments and what is due and when, shoot me an email, although all that should be in your syllabus. Okay, I'm going to close. Bless you. Have a great week. We will see you online. Bye-bye.